All right. Just had to finish cleaning up a couple of things. All right. Just had to finish cleaning up a couple of things. All right. Just had to finish.
Well. Here we are again.
Here we are. We have to quit
Episode
meeting this way.
10. Yeah. Episode 10 of the update log. Ladies and gentlemen, we've done it. We've hit double digits. All right, we can pack up, go home. No, I'm kidding. I'm joking. Yeah, we've hit episode 10. For those of you who are joining us for the 10th time or the first time, thank you very much for joining us today. We do host the update log every Wednesday night at 8. But let's just jump right into it. Today's going to be, as usual, I mean, our episodes are more discussion focused around a particular topic anyway, but this one is definitely going to be more so. Primarily because of a couple of things. But before we get into that, I want to introduce myself. I'm Rob, your host of the Update Log. And with me are Matt and Greg, my co-hosts, and also the other fourth math, right? Fourth of the Vanguard Studios. There we go.
The illustrious one.
Yeah. So, how you guys been? I know for those of our viewers who are from the U.S., obviously we just celebrated Independence Day. For those of viewers who are not from the U.S., it was yesterday was July 4th for us. So how do you guys spend y'all's Independence Day?
Mine was spent mostly just trying to calm the dogs down.
Oh yeah.
You'll have that.
That's usually how that goes. Yeah, my bulldog, she does not like the loud noises. But we did have a ton of people over. I think it was like 30 people at least. Something like that.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, I'm a little worn out, a little peopled out. Gonna lie. But it was a good time. It was a good time.
That's introvert hell right there.
Well, see, the thing about it with me, I am definitely more introvert than extrovert, but I'm a mix of both. I can be extroverted when I need to be, but I definitely prefer either not dealing with people or dealing with specific people.
Right. Aramania watched the husband. Hey, I still got all my fingers, so I did well. It was good.
There you go. That's what's important.
I learned at a very young age when it comes to fireworks. I actually had a black cat go off in my hand. So
Oof.
Oh wow.
I learned really quickly. Yeah, don't do that. It's not good.
Well, it's not a true it's not a true American holiday if someone doesn't get hurt.
I mean,
yeah,
you're not wrong. I'm not sure if we should be proud of that though.
So we got the formal piece out of the way, and we all survived the holiday.
Yeah.
So our discussion for this evening.
So yes, let's jump into it. Our discussion for this evening is actually kind of about the other side of the table when it comes to gaming, whether it be a particular genre of game or just the industry or anything to do with it. Whether you're playing a tabletop or playing a video game or what have you. And that's us. That's the community. That's the players. That is still also including the developers and the designers and all that, because they are part of the community as well. But this is about the players. This is about the places like the modding community for Skyrim or Oblivion or Cyberpunk 2077, or the third party content creators for games like Dungeons and Dragons and like Cobalt Press to name one. The various YouTube channels that, and these are just all elements of those various communities that have sprung up because of a like-minded interest in an IP, whether it be Dungeons and Dragons, Cyberpunk, Oblivion, Skyrim, 2077, Mario Kart, Super Smash Bros, Tekken. The list goes on. The reason why I particularly wanted to focus on the community today was because, gaming communities are, whether they, people believe it or not, whether the the investors want to believe it or not, the gaming community, by and large, are what make or break your game. They are kind of the backbone of any creative endeavor. A perfect example of that is Cyberpunk 2077. When that game came out, as we all know, it was not well received at all.
Just a little buggy.
Just a hair.
Just a small handful of bugs. Nothing serious.
Yeah. But and the surprising thing for a lot of people, myself included, even though I will say this, and this maybe I was one of the lucky few, I didn't have a lot of bugs when I played it, and I pre-ordered and everything, and when it came out on day of launch, I had it already downloaded, went right into it. I think I had maybe one crash that whole night. But by and large, that game upon release, was a flop, and it struck a lot of people as surprising, and it disappointed a lot of people because of the studio and the reputation they had built up until that point. Up until the launch of Cyberpunk 2077, CD Projekt Red was on a hot streak. And deservedly so. They had produced The Witcher 3, all the expansions. Let's see what else. I believe they did Witcher 2 as well. Did a couple other projects, and all of them were just smash hits. They were just good, just fantastic games. And then we get 77, and they oversold and underdelivered. Is basically what happened. However, a couple years later, and updates and communication with their community, honestly, the game's fantastic. It's even better than when it came out. And I can't remember what award they won. They won a Steam award recently. I'm gonna have to look that up now. Unless, Greg, because I know you keep abreast of a lot of it.
that I don't know. I'll look it up. Actually, I'll find it for you. But I do want to just point something out really quickly. Those games you're talking about with CD Projekt Red really kind of plays well into CD Projekt Red is the perfect one to talk about based on what we're talking about today. Like The Witcher, Cyberpunk. A lot of those games CD Projekt Red has brought into the digital universe started out as TTRPGs created by R. Talsorian, Mike Pondsmith and crew. And CD Projekt Red has just brought a different aspect to those games by creating them in a digital format for video games versus TTRPGs. So,
yeah, no, I agree. For those of you who don't know that, Cyberpunk especially started out as a TTRPG made back in 1988. I can't remember the exact date off the top of my head. But it started out as a tabletop game. First of its kind, actually, unless I'm mistaken, and if I am, feel free to correct me. Okay, yes, that was the Armania. Thank you. They got the Steam Awards 2022 Labor of Love. That was the award they got. And
She beat me to it.
yeah, she beat you to it. And while I know that award particularly goes to the studio for the work that they did, and deservedly so, that game was kept alive by the community, by the people that love the IP, by the modding community, and I mean, if anyone says otherwise, they're delusional. I'm sorry. Like they, and again, it's not just the modding community. It's not just those individuals. The studio did a hell of a job, kind of bringing to life the vision that they had over time. Instead of it coming out at launch like the way they wanted to, they kind of had to dust themselves off and build towards that, and that's fine. But definitely, what kept them afloat was the modding community. Just the love that those folks showed to the game. I mean, to the point where CD Projekt Red came out with I believe it's called a Red Mod system. And someone can correct me if I'm wrong. But basically, it was an easier way to integrate Steam mods into your games. And that to me is one of the most incredible things about the industry. Is the love that an IP will get from players, even despite like a total flop. I mean, another good one is Dungeons and Dragons. That's a game that has seen some controversy as of late, both on the good and bad side of that spectrum. Namely, as we all know it, the OGL situation, which I'm pretty sure is still ongoing in some way, shape, or form. But for those of us who's been playing for a number of years, we've seen kind of the ups and downs of that. I mean, I started in third edition in 3.5, primarily 3.5. That was the one I played the most of. And, even at that point, you had, and this was before the official Unearthed Arcana came out, which is basically, for those of you guys who don't know, a testing environment that Wizards of the Coast has out there for, to play test different potential supplementary material. They put it out for the community to play.
Named after a compendium produced by TSR for second edition.
Yes, Greg's going to talk on this quite a bit because he has played D&D since its inception. Since what, the Red Box? Yeah, he's played so and again, I came in a number of years later, so I'm not as old as Greg. So I came into 3 and 3.5, and even then, the third-party creators and this is before things like Cobalt Press and things like that. These were guys just homebrewing stuff. I mean, homebrew has been alive and well for many years. Basically, they from then till now, they've kept that game alive, and I will argue on that hill against everyone, because up until recently, Dungeons and Dragons was still a very, very niched game. We won't talk about 4th edition. That one doesn't exist. That was a mistake. Although some good
about 4th edition.
No, it was terrible. It was terrible. Okay, it was absolutely terrible. The at-will system.
Yeah, usually conversations go from 3.5 to 5e.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah,
3.5 doesn't get talked about with reverence. So, I mean, it's, you know.
I personally love 3.5. I personally love 3.5. I mean, it spawned Pathfinder, you know, and that's another good IP. But yeah, like the communities of these, and again, these are just major ones that we all kind of know and have heard about. The communities involved in those IPs have, I mean, a labor of love is only it's the only way to put it. A lot of them have gone back in and made better certain classes. Still talking about D&D. Have offered up, uh, really really good home brews and just alternate, you know, rules and things that you can do. Um, and that's really kept that particular IP afloat. And I don't mean that in a way where Dungeons and Dragons was suffering financially. Again, I don't can't really speak on their financials, but just in the eyes of the gaming community, like, it was still very niched until very recently because of the popularity of things like Critical Role and the movie, and high profile individuals coming out who say, hey, yeah, I played D&D. I mean, I've played it since forever. And it's, I know I'm rambling. Someone take over.
Well, we were just
Someone
gonna,
take over.
I would say another thing that probably contributed as just one factor was probably also the pandemic, because a lot of people
you're right,
going outside, so they were looking for like online ways to enjoy themselves, and they joined like an online D&D group.
Mhm.
And like that's like, honestly, a lot of things rose in popularity during the pandemic because people had nothing else to do. So they went online and found a community and started playing some game.
Yes. Yes. I don't, that's absolutely huge. I mean, I definitely think there, huge impact over the last, I would say 3 years, but I don't think it's all that, because,
Oh, of course
with,
not.
and generationally speaking, like my generation, as we grew up and entered the workforce and kind of got out in the world, a lot of us were gamers. I mean, we were the people who grew up watching our parents and our older siblings play D&D and games of that nature. I remember being a small child and watching my older brother, my older sister, and all my cousins sitting around the table playing Dungeons and Dragons. And I desperately wanted to, I was like 6, 7 years old. I desperately wanted to play. I was watching them roll the dice and all this, and they're telling the story, and that was just the coolest thing in the world to me. But they wouldn't let me play. Yeah, that drove me even harder. I'm like, yeah, I'm going to do this. But with my generation, I think, one of the shifts that happened is the realization of the value of role playing, and not just from an entertainment standpoint, but the value in social interaction and education.
Yeah.
Because in education, it has become a large piece. I'm not necessarily like university curriculum. However, I know it is used there as well. But in business, I mean, there's a lot of the teaching people, especially soft skills, which really comes with role playing the situation. And that's something that when, early in my career, you didn't role play. I mean, you did what you were told. Here's how you do it.
Apparently Aramani is going to use this in her math classes. Yeah. There you go.
Well, it's hugely impactful, and I think the realization of what you can do with that by helping someone to just open up their mind and drive for new and different experiences without actually putting yourself into a compromising or dangerous position. You in essence are just pretending. I'm pretending I'm the customer, or I'm an unruly customer, or whatever it is, but I still get to see what that interaction looks like from a stand back point of view, and I get to control the interaction to some degree because I'm the one who's interacting as a persona, you know.
Yeah, it's also a fun and creative way to get students to practice basic math skills. I mean, honestly, you're not wrong. I mean, there's it's all basic, but there's quite of number crunching that goes into D&D and most tabletops. If for those of you who haven't played, especially D&D, because they have what is it? Let me see how many dice, because I have actually some dice sitting in.
But, I mean, yeah,
they have 6 different dice.
the quick thought here, though, it doesn't have to. I mean, that's we see this in the role-playing communities of today. Most of your role-playing games still involve dice. I mean, and that's to figure out your variables, and to have some form of, hey, Berlicious, to have some form of control on the game so that you do have that variation. And to help a person tell the story, because I mean, sometimes it's good to have that variability in your game. But sure. More and more, the communities that are growing up around role playing in general are very, very improvish, and I don't think that's a bad thing at all.
Oh no,
you have a base story, and that's what the game or the environment, even video game RPGs, provide, is that base story, that lore, that environment for you to be creative within, and then tell your own story. And I think that's really become. I think it's always been.
Yeah.
What it's about is telling your own story, but I think in recent years it's become much more clear, and a lot of the writing that's happening now is very geared towards that, telling a story versus just playing a game.
Exactly, yeah. Brenticious. Hey, look, man, we didn't tell you to blow all your points, okay? That was not our fault. We appreciate it, though. We appreciate the dedication, but that was your decision to make, man.
But
I don't know if I appreciate that or not. I didn't get these points.
But yeah,
look, you're the DM.
Yeah, but role-playing games like D&D and all that stuff, they're a unique combination of both playing a game and storytelling. Because, I mean, with video games, you're just pressing the buttons and you're playing the game, and and they can be fun, but you're always going through the game's story. Maybe you can choose certain paths, but those are just the game's story. But in the TTRPGs and stuff, you're kind of telling the story, as well as you're telling the story alongside all the other players and your DM. But it's a unique thing that you don't find in video games like that, and so it's one of the draws to it.
Wouldn't that just be awesome if we finally had a video game where you could create a story? But
I mean, there are certain games that can give you tools to create your own scenarios and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
But for the most part, say, in video games, like RPG Maker.
Yeah.
Well, RPG Maker, correct me if I'm wrong, but that's more of almost like a game engine rather than a game in of itself, right?
Brody says technically a game.
I think it's a mix of both, a game and a game engine in a way. I've heard of it. I have not really dabbled too much with it, so.
It's now.
Okay, it is now, but wasn't for PS1.
Oh, okay. Okay, yeah, I've seen stuff that comes out of that. I mean, it's it's a good place for like beginners, and also,
No.
I mean, you're not going to make any high production thing out of it, but
No.
if you're indie or beginner, I'd say that could be a good place sometimes. But yeah, the RPG Maker. There's actually some cool stuff that comes out of that.
I want to present an idea to you guys because I mean, the with what we're talking about today and the community base to this, I know our earlier discussions really revolved quite a bit around the modding community, because that definitely is a community with a lot of sway when it comes to the video game industry.
Oh yeah.
But here's what I would like to present to you, because if you TTRPGs, the OGL, the Open Gaming License, when it was first created, really was the beginning of the modding community in TTRPGs. It spawned in a completely different way because it allowed these other people to create works and then publish those works. Complementary to the main work, which at the time would have been Dungeons and Dragons, because that's the big one when it comes to the OGL conversation. But that's in my mind, that is the modding community for TTRPGs, and the objective for people who want to be modders in that realm is to break into that and to create works that get published.
Oh yeah, definitely. The homebrew scene for D&D. Yeah, it's the same thing
massive.
as modders.
Yeah.
They're creating, essentially it's just creating your own content. Whether you're adding a new adventure, you're adding new weapons or abilities and stuff, or just changes to some of the current existing rules. Like, I'm sure there are plenty of people who don't like spell components, and there are plenty of homebrew
Spell
rules
what?
that create. Yeah, exactly. No one likes spell components, and so I'm sure you can find a lot of homebrew rules that try to try to take what spell components were meant to be, which was kind of like a balance for how powerful magic is, and actually make it something that is people will bother with.
Yeah.
Because people don't want to bother with the spell components. And so they ignore it. And then everyone goes, oh, magic is too powerful. It's because everyone ignores a major balancing part to it that limits the use of magic. But that limit, it's so frustrating to deal with.
Okay, so for those who haven't played D&D, I'm pretty sure a large part of our viewership and probably our community have, but for those who haven't, spell components in D&D as a spellcaster are various bits of items that you have to purchase if you're a spellcaster. And I mean, same thing like ammunition and things like that, like arrows and crossbow bolts, things like that. Kind of the same vein, but for spellcasters. They can often be very expensive. They can often be very bookkeepy, as I like to put it, for both the DM and the player. That's part of the reason why most DMs and most players kind of just assume that, hey, you got the components, you spent the gold, kind of deal, even though you haven't really spent the gold.
Here's a weird idea for you, along that line of thinking, and you guys know how I feel about spell components because I agree with what you're saying. But in a D&D sense, spell components actually do lend themselves to a tremendous amount of plot hooks, because of the more powerful spells requiring things like the Heart of a Dragon or something like that. I mean, that in and of itself is an adventure right there to acquire those items.
Yeah. But I guess the thing when it comes to like modders. No, thank you, Armania, for the
thanks for the
5 gifted subs.
5.
Very nice.
Jeez, 5 gifted subs. Holy damn.
Yeah. But when it comes to like homebrewers and modders, and the thing about just about any healthy community is that whenever there is a lack of something in the base game that they're supporting, they're gonna make it themselves. That's a that's a sign of like a community who really loves the game that they're built around. When they see what's lacking, they're like, you know what? I'm gonna make that thing that's lacking. Whether it's just more content, such as adventures, or if they want to try to make more weapons or whatever it is that they want to do. And even better is when a game actually, like, the makers of the game roll with it. They let these people create more content. Kind of like how you're talking about with Cyberpunk with their red mod system. Parents saying, "Hey, mod makers, come on in,
right?
Show us what you got."
Yeah, I mean, and there have been oftentimes, and again, we're switching back to kind of the video game version of this.
They learned from Bethesda.
Yeah.
Well, don't learn too much from Bethesda.
Yeah. So let's pump the brakes on that.
Bullshit.
Let's pump the brakes on that one, because I mean, pretty sure they still have to pay people.
So I have an example. I have an example for you of a of a community that developed into a publishing group. Not publishing group, but a creation group that got a lot of their work published. And actually, I used to have a copy of this years ago, and I just picked up a new copy. There it is. You notice
Roll Raids.
Yeah, Roll Raids.
Huh.
And this is an OGL example, because they used the OGL for D&D to create this, which is a direct compendium to be played with D&D. Obviously, I think this was like 2nd edition that this was created for, so it's a little outdated at this point with 5e, but it was awesome. And it introduced a whole... Because at that point you had Vecna, but you really didn't have... Like, liches had not been really well defined. You basically just had a little thing in the monster manual talking about liches being powerful undead, and that was about it. So what these guys did is they created something called the Lich Lord Council and created an entire continent. Yeah, yes, it was taking time, Bob. I think the longest session I ever did for D&D was like 4 days straight. It involved lots of Doritos and Mountain Dew, but it was like 4 days straight.
My God.
Get Greg as a poster child for that dude from South Park sitting there with Dorito dust on his keyboard.
The World of Warcraft episode?
Yeah.
God, I love that episode.
I learned a long time ago that you either take pride in your nerdiness or hide from it. I guess I don't know.
I totally agree, man. Take pride in the nerd and the geek and everything, because it is what it is. I think the longest session I ever had was 12 hours, and the only reason why it was that short by comparison is because I was the one DMing and I was getting tired. I think we had been playing till like 3 or 4 in the morning, and I was like, okay, I'm falling asleep here at the table.
Yeah, couple of these 5.5 hour Cyberpunk sessions that we've done have kicked my rear.
I was gonna say, yeah, you've been doing some late night stuff yourself. So for those of you who don't know, Greg DMs one of our 2 private games, and are using... Actually, I was... Berdicious said, I wonder if people are using AI to DM. I was actually about to get to that, and yes, I'm pretty sure they are. I mean, and again, correct me if I'm wrong, but Chat GPT, that's like an AI system, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, and I read somewhere, I believe someone actually tried to run a campaign or something. I think it was a D&D campaign or something like that. with ChatGPT, just using the system as like both the DM and the players, or I believe either ChatGPT was the DM. Um, one of the two. I can't remember exactly off the top of my head how that article went. But apparently, according to the article, it did pretty well. So I mean, there's been a very large push that I've seen from a couple different lanes pushing for DM-less like RPG system, like TTRPG systems, and a push towards that. I mean, I know D&D, WotC is trying to push, or at least it was kind of packaged in the whole OGL thing. They were trying to push their own VTT, similar to Roll20 or Foundry, or that kind of space. I don't know if they're still going ahead with that. Probably are, but I haven't heard really much on that. But I wouldn't be to continue what you said, British. I wouldn't be surprised if companies and maybe even players are starting to try to use AI to either replace a DM, or let's say as a DM, like you need more players, trying to rope in an AI to be a player instead of like creating a DMPC.
An AI player, can you imagine?
Oh my god.
I feel like it's not quite at that point yet where the AI will be able to effectively keep track of like the rules of the game. Cause like this is a little off topic, but from I guess gaming, but AI was used for lawyering at one point. Naturally,
what?
the lawyers who did this got in a shit ton of trouble because they were trying to use AI to look up for pretty much the history of certain cases that would try to support their side of the argument. I forget what the case was even about. And honestly, that's not even the important part of the story. But essentially what the AI did is that it couldn't find anything. So it created essentially cases that didn't exist that the lawyers then referenced in the actual court. And yes, they
Serious?
got found. Yeah, they didn't double check.
Wow.
They got found out, and they got in a lot of trouble for that.
Oh, I bet they did. I bet they freaking did.
But yeah, like
Because
if
wow.
like the AI, like it can't, and they were using Chat GPT, so it's like
They were?
yeah, they
Huh.
were. Yeah, so the thing is that like it's not at a point yet where it can accurately reference a existing set of rules effectively, and there are going to be times where it might just make shit up. And because of that, and leaving out the entire bit of like its capacity of memory to keep a storyline going, or the human element of playing D&D and stuff like that, I don't
Making
think
shit
it's even
up,
gonna
that
be able
never
to make
happens.
yeah, but like I don't think it's even going to be able to like keep the rules straight.
It can't keep its story straight.
Yeah.
It's gonna fold on the cross examination.
So like I think
You don't need an AI to do that. You got me. I mean,
damn, calling himself out like that.
yeah, like I think AI, it's going to, any campaign run using it, it's going to be extremely simple. It's not going to have any of the
Any
consistent.
nuance?
It's not going to have any consistent storytelling. I feel like it's mostly just going to fall under a simple kind of repetition of you're walking along, here's an encounter with random things, you fight it, and it's just going to be random things happening one after the other. From my experience with AI storytelling, that I feel like that's just what's going to happen.
Yeah. And honestly, I'm not surprised. I am curious, again, based on the discussion that we're having today about community, about the players, kind of being that opposite kind of balancing to the IPs and the studios and the games themselves, being that central piece along with the IPs and the studios and whatnot. Um, I wonder. I'm starting to wonder. It's in those instances, what's the why the push for DM-less games or having AI take over positions? If anybody has been looking into that and can kind of shed some light on that, both either one of you two or anybody in the in our audience, I'm curious as to why, and
I
the
can.
reason why I say I'm curious as to why is because for me, and again, and maybe this is a simple approach, is it doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense, and we'll use tabletop RPGs as an example. It's the most fitting one. Without a DM, the DMs help craft the story. The DMs help regulate the table. I mean, the DMs are just as integral to the table as the players are, because again, ideally it's supposed to be a collaborative story. And if the goal of a TTRPG game, whether it be Dungeons and Dragons or Cyberpunk, or Pathfinder, whichever one, is to tell a good story. And in my mind, that is the goal of those systems. Why are you trying to get rid of a critical piece?
I think
I,
Ticking Time Bob hit on something really important there. Because yes, DMs are rare. And even the
Ah,
DMs,
good point.
even the DMs that are out there, I mean, there's very few. Matter of fact, I don't know anybody who started playing role playing games so they could be a DM. They started playing role
Yeah.
playing games so they could role play. That was the create that story creation piece and tell the story and actually enjoy the story. So that most people will try DMing maybe once or twice, and after they see how frustrating it can be, they're like, "Oh no, I'll just be a player." Um, One more thing I would like to add to that, what you're talking about there, and Ticking Time Bob's comment. I think those two things go right together, because if I was to speculate on why, the financial reason behind it, everything comes back to money. Um, the reality behind it right now is the platforms have shifted to pay to play, essentially. Um, you have Rolls20, you have, Foundry, you have all these VTTs that are out there. Okay. And yeah, I know, right? What's money? Um, well, what is the next logical step? Because, yes, really good DMs are making some good money on it. Here's the thing with it. I don't know anyone that can make a living off of Dewey. And it's simply because I'm sure you probably could, but you've got to, with the amount of time that is going into prepping the adventure and getting everything ready to go, you'd have to charge. You'd either have to have really large parties, which is not going to work for most people, are not going to want to pay for a 3-hour session so they can sit there for 2.5 hours and play for 30 minutes.
Wait for their turn.
Yeah. So one potential thing is, if you can take the DM piece out of the equation and replace it with AI, now you can create platforms where people will pay to play with an AI DM. And that's speculative on my part, but I definitely could see that being a business move going down the road.
Honestly, I think you're right. And as you were speaking about this, I started thinking back to WotC's. And for those of you who don't know, WotC is an acronym for Wizards of the Coast. But WotC's push for their own VTT, basically in direct competition to things like Foundry. I want to say Roll20, but I'm pretty sure they bought Roll20.
I'd have to check that. I don't think they
But I can't
bought.
remember.
I don't think they bought Roll20. D&D Beyond and Roll20 are in a partnership at this point.
Yes,
But as far as
that's
I know, they are still two separate companies. But I could definitely see that. I could see those two merging at some point in the future.
okay. No, they are. Never mind. You are correct. They are different companies. But yeah, I do remember that D&D Beyond and Roll20 are definitely in a partnership. But yeah, I wouldn't be surprised. Number one, if WotC does try to buy Roll20. Gemma hates. Gemma says it feels rather undercreative, even though I know AI is ages above where it had been. I
Oh yeah.
completely agree with you on that regard. Primarily because while AI is leaps and bounds ahead of where it started, it's nowhere near where it needs to be to actually be a DM for anything.
To be quite honest with you, the actual market for a ADM, a person who is good at creating content for players, may actually become more valuable with the advent with AI getting into this marketplace.
Oh yeah,
Simply for that purpose.
They're going to be terrible. They're going to be terrible.
Right,
sorry,
right.
I mean the AI is going to be terrible.
Yeah, pretty much. Like, and I think that's kind of like where the core of the issue is. It's like it's almost like a supply and demand type thing, where there are only so many DMs, and there are far more people who want to be players. There aren't enough DMs for them all. So that's where this push for the AI DMs comes from, because there just aren't enough DMs. But again, like as we've been saying, it's not at a point yet where I could say an AI would be able to competently DM for a game.
And
it's gonna be wonky.
Yeah, hey, it's Gemma. She actually brings up a very, very good point. Originality is key, and you can still tell when someone pulls something from ChatGPT.
Oh
yeah, I mean, I'm 100%. I mean, and I haven't even played any games or really seen too much. I think Matt, you showed me something about SpongeBob not too long ago. Absolutely hilarious, by the way. Absolutely,
the AI
hilarious.
But
yeah, it's very obvious that the AI, I'm going to use air quotes there, is nowhere near where it needs to be. But kind of circling back to what my original point was, it doesn't surprise me, like you said, Greg, that these companies are pushing for that because it's they can monetize it. And as I'm thinking about it, I believe that is one of the things that came up in the OGL situation when folks started kind of digging into it and started looking at WotC's push to create their own VTT. It was like a lot of it, I believe, and I could be wrong on this, was part of their push was DM-less campaigns. So I'm assuming they were going to be using things like AI and ChatGPT and all that jazz. But again, I mean, I'm gonna be honest. I still don't even get it from a business standpoint, because your whole goal is to create games, or at least it used to be, was to create games, and again, to facilitate social interaction, to facilitate storytelling and people. That's the thing. And honestly, I think VTTs were VTTs were a double-edged sword. It was a good and a bad thing. It was a good thing because most of them sprung up due to the pandemic, to offer people an alternative and an easier way, a more convenient way to gather and play games like D&D and Vampire the Masquerade and all the tabletop games. But and it offered a pseudo kind of version of the social interaction, because I mean, basically it offered what we're doing here now. We're sitting in front of our computers talking. But there is no substitute for sitting at a table with 4 or 5 of your friends right there with you, having a good time, creating story.
Many
So
many bags of Doritos.
Many bags of Doritos, a bunch of cans of Mountain Dew, a bunch of boxes of pizza sitting over in the corner. Got one guy passed out on the couch because he can't hang. So there's no substitute for that. And I mean, and the closest I think we're ever going to get, and I will die on this hill, is the VTTs. Especially if you have cameras enabled and you're talking on Discord or what have you. It's surprising to see that and again, this is obviously talking about the WotC, because I think that they're really the only ones doing this at this point. That there's a push for that in such a socially focused and community focused genre of gaming. It's, I don't know. I guess yeah. It's the whole argument of the bottom line. It's like, how can we get some more money out of these guys?
Yeah, I mean that's what the whole OGL thing was. They had a very strong creative community that was making content, and they want to be like, hey, you want a piece of that pie, which was obviously, as we now know, not the best way to handle your community. Because those people, like, when you take, like, a very... Because, as I said before, when a community loves the game, they're going to create stuff for it. So the D&D community loves D&D. So when the people who own D&D pretty much say, like, pretty much the meme of, you made this? I made this. They call that shit. Like, of course that's not gonna fly. And it's a slap in the face to the community when you take what they love and said, like, I'm gonna take what you did and I'm gonna make money from it. It's like, what? Hold up.
Yeah. Yeah, I so recently, and I actually believe he is here. Where is he? Old Man Garrus. I'm pretty sure he's in the chat. Or he might have been. He might have left.
Somewhere around here, I think.
Yeah, HM intellectual property is real. No, yeah.
Yeah.
Yes, there he is. He and I have actually spoken, and actually all of us have spoken. And from a business standpoint, oh, Brodicious, I left. Well, welcome back. Yeah, well, I'm glad we can't get rid of you that easily. But it was explained to me, and for the most part, I kind of understood the heart of the OGL, the change from a business standpoint solely. But I mean, I think we can all agree they definitely went about it the worst possible way. And yeah, and they, like Matt, you said, they really spit in the face of the community, which, again, whole topic of this discussion is the driving force behind anything. Behind anything is the community and the people that are buying your product, whatever it is, using your service, whatever it is. They're the heart of your business.
There's far too much. There's far too much of the community out there that and some. I mean, there's some folks that we know as from our studio. There's some folks that we deal with regularly that are, well, semi-regularly, that their entire business is based on that OGL. That's their livelihood. And when that announcement was made with the verbiage, that was the problem. Is the verbiage that was put in there was essentially, I don't remember the exact verbiage right off the top of my head, but it was essentially what Matt was saying. You made this, I made this. Depending,
they take what you made and then they will profit off it.
And that was the problem for the community, is because you've got these people who have built their livelihood off of the OGL, in which is in support of the main game. The whole purpose behind the OGL was simply to expand that marketplace. That's the whole purpose behind it, is to allow people that are out there doing the homebrew thing anyway. Like we said,
Yeah.
DMs are rare. And those are the people that are doing this. The people that are out there running games, the people that are out there, they're the ones who are also doing the creating. For the most part, I'm not saying that no players ever create anything, because they do. They create a lot of things. The DM's dependent upon the players. But these folks using that OGL are expanding that community, and they have been for years. Their products continue to expand the community beyond whatever base game it's coming from. There's a few different systems at this point, not just the D20 system based on D&D. And that was huge. The verbiage that they put in there was this, coming out and saying, "Hey, we now have the right to just take it from you."
Yep, that was a huge deal.
Yeah, and that's there's a lot of even we were working on a compendium, and we completely shelved it. I mean, there went, I don't know how many months we put into that.
Probably at least 6 months.
Yeah, completely shelved project, move on to something else because of the uncertainty involved with that. There's just so many people that would be impacted by that there's no way if they would have moved forward with that. Number one, they would have completely destroyed their community and the expanded community, because who is going to want to follow along with that? Only people who have no other choice. That's it. Every company that had a choice took it. Every studio that had a choice took it. They are working on their own material without the OGL at this point.
Yeah, I mean, and I so I'm gonna preface this by saying this is my own opinion, and I could be grossly off the mark, but using Critical Role as an example, I mean, they were, and I don't, if anybody from Critical Role hears this, I don't mean this negatively. They were the face of D&D. They brought D&D to a lot of people who otherwise would have never played the game. They helped popularize it for more modern audiences, I would say. Definitely the last 5 years, probably going back almost close to 10 years, I would argue, or somewhere between there. But I mean, for those of you guys who don't know, they've split. They still do like their D&D campaign, but Critical Role and Matt Mercer and all of them, they've gone off to do their own thing. They're creating their own system. They're kind of moving away from D&D, and I would not be surprised if the OGL situation had something to do with that.
Oh yeah,
because Matt Mercer himself has created stuff for them. Like a couple of examples. What's the damn book? Let me Google this real quick. But I'll tell you off the top of my head. The Bloodhunter subclass, which is still on Earth Arcana. It's not official, but might as damn well be. It was created by Matt Mercer. And let's see, a couple of actual compendiums.
Yeah, because like the thing is that like even though they rolled back their decision on the OGL because of all the backlash, people have lost faith in Wizards. Like and that's why you Critical Role and others are still splitting off from creating D&D based content because they don't have faith that Wizards of the Coast won't try this again and go through with it the next time.
Yeah. So
and that's only shooting themselves in the foot, really, because a healthy community that continues to generate content for you breathes life into your product.
Yeah, I mean, it's free freaking advertising.
The OGL debacle was, for Dungeons and Dragons which is a wholly owned subsidiary of Wizards of the Coast, which is a wholly owned subsidiary of Hasbro. Bad news. Everybody else, good news. Because that loss of faith, that loss of trust, has opened up that market for all of your indie studios, your small studios, your private groups that want to go out and create content. The challenge is that you either have to use a different OGL or a base system of mechanics, or you have to create one to tell story with. And there's a marketplace for it now that's wide open. I don't know how long it's going to be wide open, but right now it's wide open. I would not be surprised to see, like Gen Con this year, I would not be surprised to see, I wouldn't be surprised to see a massive amount of new gaming material that's out there being pushed into the public. But I also wouldn't be surprised to see if it's extremely limited, because there's other people involved in that, publishers for one, that are going to want to try and isolate where you figure out where the profit centers are going to be, what's really going to sell, and focus in on that, especially with costs and inflation, all that good stuff. But it wouldn't surprise me if there's a bunch of people that are rushing right now to try to get their product ready, to do a quick start launch at Gen Con or one of the other large conventions, if not in the US, then in the European market, probably.
Yep. And yeah, Bro Dishes, they also filled the void when people didn't have time or group to play. I'm assuming you're talking about Critical Role, and yeah, they did. I mean, their first campaign alone is like over 100 episodes, each 3 hours long. It's ridiculous. But to kind of paint the picture, to continue to paint the picture, so because of Critical Role and popularity, they spawned, let's see, The Legend of Vox Machina, both season 1 and season 2. Those are the animated series on Amazon Prime, about their characters from season 1. The Explorer's Guide to Wildemount was one of the companions that they brought out, and The Call of the Netherdeep is another one. And that's just a small slice of the world that they helped build, the world of Exandria. And they did that for WotC. They did that to help push the product. Imagine, and here's the thing. I mean, for those of you guys who don't know, the OGL, some of the wording I can remember off the top of my head was, if you made $750,000 or something like that, you would owe WotC 25%. That's 25% is a lot.
Big piece of the pie.
Lot. That is a big piece of your pie. And I mean, just think, if you're Critical Role, you know how much money they're pulling it. I mean, it's just, yeah, that was out of. It's just it surprises me, and does not surprise me that a company that large would pretty much give the middle finger to their community. Like, you know what, we're doing things our way now.
It just goes to show how well they understood they didn't.
Not at all.
Right.
Yeah.
They thought that they were, whatever, the masters of the community. And that's probably the downside to it. I say that for lack of a better way to describe it. When it comes to building that community, if you're going to build the community, you got to stay engaged with what your community wants. You just have to. I mean, that's the whole point in building that community, and for the community to be engaged with you is to feel as though they're wanted, they're cared about.
Yeah.
And that's
fulfilling a need that they have.
That's exactly what WotC did. Is they stuck up their middle finger and said, "Hey, we don't give two rats' asses about you."
Yeah, we're gonna do what we want. We're gonna get our slice of y'all's pie, and that's it. And here's the thing that I am proud of, and I'm proud to be part of the gaming community at large, but the D&D community, is that across the board, the community came together and said, "Nah, we ain't gonna let that slide," and pushed back and won, and just flat out won. Had them like, all right, well, yep, we're they had them pretty much tripping over their words, trying to try to fix what they did.
From Armania, not the first one I have seen do it. They fail to understand that without the community, they lose their profits. Exactly.
Yeah.
And like
Yeah.
another company that's very guilty of this type of thing, of like constantly pretty much fighting their own community, Nintendo. They are notorious for the way that they handle their community. Whether it's like for the for like the Smash Bros. Melee, which has a strong competitive scene, never lending any support, meaning that like it struggles. Melee competitive really struggles. Pokemon. A lot of people are very eager to create Pokemon fan made content. And there's actually a lot of really good stuff out there. But what happens every time something actually starts to take off? Bam, cease and desist straight from Nintendo. They say, nah, stop that. Stop making this cool thing. Because let me tell you, I've seen so many cool Pokemon things, whether it's they've taken an emulator and created a unique game mode out of it. Like people love Pokemon. Even if the more recent games are a little like, yeah. But you have people creating unique challenges, whether it's like the Nuzlocke, the Ironmon. You have people making full-on Pokemon fan-made games, such as actually using RPG Maker. Someone made a Pokemon Infinite Fusion, where the whole thing was that you could take two Pokemon and fuse them together to create a whole new Pokemon. It's actually amazing.
That kind of sounds like a different game called Bloodlines.
I'm not terribly familiar with that. Actually, I think I've seen like ads for that.
Yeah, it's a mobile. It's a mobile
YouTube
game.
shit. But yeah, no, like it's an absolutely amazing Pokemon fan made game. They have a lot of custom they have a lot of artists making custom sprites for these fusions, and god damn, some amazing stuff. And it's incredible to see that and it's completely free, by the way. You can just go to a forum and download the whole thing.
Huh.
And it's that's how much love people have for Pokemon and a lot of other Nintendo IPs, that they create this type of stuff, like real games that have a lot of effort and soul put behind them. And then Nintendo will look at this, instead of thinking, hold up, maybe we should pay attention to what this guy is doing. Maybe we could hire this guy. Nah, they're like, bam, cease and desist. Stop that, you naughty person, you.
I just and again, maybe Nintendo's they're interesting.
Well, Nintendo is also
out of touch with their community. That's they're definitely guilty of that.
A lot of people don't know this, but Nintendo is actually a very old company. They're a very old game company. They're not most of the time people think of Nintendo and they think of the first Nintendo game system, like they just sprung up out of nowhere. That's not true at all.
They've been around for a minute.
Nah.
That company's over 100 years old. I mean, they've been around a long time. They are the Hasbro of Asia, more or less. But
yep.
And their old-fashionedness, it definitely shows in the way that they handle the communities, whether it's fan-made content or even even if it's stuff like YouTube videos. They Nintendo was among the last companies to realize people making YouTube videos of their games, like Let's Plays, reviews, stuff like that, is a good thing. For a while, they even had this they don't have it around anymore, but a while ago, several years, they had this program up that said like, "Hey, you enter this program, you can make YouTube videos about Nintendo stuff, and we won't come after you, but you're gonna have to pay." I feel like it was like 30%.
Oh man,
Yeah, it was bad. They don't do that anymore, thank God, because they finally realized, oh, yeah,
piss people off.
everyone else is realizing that people talking about our games and making videos about them is a good thing. It's free advertising. So they let up on that. But they're like the last people actually trying to fight that.
Brodicious said if they didn't screw Sony over, we might not have gotten the PlayStation. Well, thank God for that. Holy crap. I don't even know where we would be without the PlayStation. I'm sorry. Thank God they fucked up. Because yeah, no.
We'd all have to
man.
play games on our PCs.
Well, I mean, that's not a terrible alternative. I'm just saying, though, as a kid, I didn't grow up with the PC until later on in life. I had PlayStation. That was my jam. The Legend. Oh man, don't even get me started on Legend of Dragoon. That game is criminally underrated, but absolutely one of the best RPGs ever, hands down.
He doesn't have a strong opinion on that or anything.
I look. Let me put it this way: I played that game so much the disc broke. Okay, it's up there with, for me, it is up there with Final Fantasy Tactics, which is another just that mean, and I don't use these terms often, but those two games are fucking goated. Period. Final Fantasy Tactics is absolutely one of the best Final Fantasy stories ever told. Period.
Yeah.
It's the last disc. so I got to play it one last time, and then I guess I burnt out the disc or whatever because it wouldn't load. So I was super sad about that. Super sad.
Yeah. Speaking of classic RPGs, Nintendo did announce that they're remaking the classic Mario RPG from way back when. Which is an interesting move. I always thought that the people calling for that were just a vocal minority, but it's actually happening now.
Well, when they just spent hundreds of millions of dollars making a movie, you got to figure there's more to follow.
You know what? That's
True.
fair. Because the Mario movie did make a lot of money. And so I guess it was probably a good time to bring some new Mario content out.
Absolutely.
Which I'm interested in seeing how that's going to go down, because I never played the original Mario RPG, though. It's the history of that series that is interesting, because the Mario RPG is essentially what turned into Paper Mario.
True.
And so, this is kind of the root of Paper Mario right here that they're remaking.
Huh.
And finally, everyone who won't stop screaming about Geno for Smash, they'll finally get their favorite puppet boy back. Seriously, Geno fanboys are very loud. They make themselves known.
Okay, I apologize for that. I was just trying to see where my dog went. I thought she was sitting behind me, but nope, she just walked off somewhere else. I gotta keep an eye on her. She likes getting into trouble.
Oh, Bordesis, you're a Sephiroth fan, so you probably lost it when they announced Sephiroth for Smash.
Sephiroth all the way. He was the '90s emo boy.
Look, Smash knew what they were doing when they put in a shirtless skin for Sephiroth in Smash. They knew exactly what they were doing.
True story. See, and this is what we're talking about. That's this right here, this discussion about different games and all that stuff. That only comes about because of the love of an IP and a community being built around. And that is honestly the other half. And this is probably gonna be controversial for some, but I will say it's the more important of the two. Is that community, primarily because I mean, look at all the big events, Gen Con, Anime Con, both in New York and in, I believe, the one in California is in like LA, or San Diego, one of the two. Those have come about because of the communities that have built around those different IPs and the love of anime or TTRPGs in the case of Gen Con, and I mean you have things like Halo Con. Even CD Projekt Red has a con for Cyberpunk in Poland. It's these events have a direct result of just people loving these games. In some cases, to a worrying degree. In some cases, the heart's in the right place, but some people be going a little too far. Anyway, and it's
Well, when you're talking about the community piece, that's, and I agree 100%. The community is the first thing, because that's what you're trying to build. That's what we're trying to build, is that community. But it can work against you too, and that's where I think Cyberpunk 2077 is the perfect example of both sides of that equation, where
True.
one community, or part of the community, if you want to look at it as a whole, totally decided, you know what? No, this is, we expect better when the game came out.
Yeah.
And it had a devastating effect. And I'm not saying that there weren't, circumstances leading up to that, which caused the garbage that came out. Here's the thing. Every game that comes out, when it first comes out, it has glitches. It has issues. Every single one. There's none that come to market and they're just perfect. Go play.
Yeah,
It's awesome.
not a single one.
Right. But in this case, the community had high expectations, high hopes, in large part because that's what they were sold, is these high hopes. And then when the game came out, it just didn't deliver. And there were aspects of it.
The basics.
Right. There were aspects of it that were really awesome, but it really, really was a subpar product. And and that portion of the community tanked it, because they were very vocal about the fact that they didn't get what they were promised. It's the other part of the community, the modders, and those people who are like, hey, you know what? Yeah, this sucks, but we don't want to see our beloved product go down in flames. So we're going to get behind this, and we're going to make it better. And that's the two sides of the community right now. Now, a lot of those people that at first were the what was coming out of them was, yeah, this is garbage, this sucks, CD Projekt Red should be ashamed of themselves, they're never going to sell a game again, blah, 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 blah. There's all kinds of things that were said. But those people now are turning back around and looking at this and saying, hey, you know what? It's not bad. This isn't bad. I can deal with this. I'll move forward with this. This is now a good game. And that's the effect of the community working together.
Yeah.
Because, as I said before, when it comes to modders, they're going to look at something that's missing from the game and they'll make it themselves, which in Cyberpunk 2077's case was
a lot.
Things function. So they created a lot of their own bug fixes until CD Projekt Red eventually patched the game themselves to where now it is. I mean, if you play it now, you're probably still going to run into some things here and there.
Hey!
I certainly did, but I never broke the game outright.
You can say it, Matt. You can say it. CD Projekt Red learn from Bethesda.
No, because here's the thing: Bethesda didn't bother fixing shit.
They'll try to steal your shit.
Their modder community did.
The only thing they ever fixed was giants launching you into the air, but that was actually a bug people liked. So when people spoke up, they're like, okay, we just won't fix anything. You know what? The bugs are just part of the game's quirky nature. It's a feature. It's like, no, get rid of the shit that breaks the game, and just we're fine if you keep the weird ones that launch you in the air and stuff like that. But I don't want to fall through the world. I don't want this quest progression to be broken. Or I can't complete this quest line anymore. Fix that. And they're like, nah, we're not gonna fix that. But who wants another re-release of Skyrim? You know what?
How many times has that game been fucking re-released?
It's been 12 years.
Let it die.
We still don't have the next Elder Scrolls game. It's been over a decade, and they're still re-releasing that shit. Give me something new.
Skyrim Microwave Edition.
Exactly. That's the shit they're doing.
Wait. What? That's a thing?
No. But
I was gonna
idea
say.
of releasing
Rob was about to go look for it so he could buy it.
No, I was about to flip the table. It's fucking Skyrim.
It's like the idea where they're anytime there's a new console, hey, guess what? Skyrim's on it. Every pretty much count a Skyrim re-release for pretty much every year since its initial release. I would be surprised if there's a single year that does not have some Skyrim re-release on it. It's ridiculous. They've milked it for everything they possibly could.
And they're still milking it.
Oh yeah, they definitely are.
And they probably will be able to continue milking it.
Probably, because all things said, given even considering it's a buggy piece of crap, it's still a good game. And it's still it's still something that has a strong community of modders behind it. People have modded the shit out of Skyrim. They've modded the shit out of Oblivion, the previous Elder Scrolls game. Hell, they've even modded the shit out of Morrowind, the game before that. And that's an old game, and people are still modding that.
It's because it's easy to do. And that's, I'll correct that, because I'm not a modder. I'm not saying that modding is easy. There's a lot involved with writing the code and whatnot. But Bethesda's system is, it's all the same game engine. It's all 60 frames per second. It's all the same game. All their games are the same game engine, just with a different coat of paint.
Oh yeah, they've been using the same thing since Morrowind. Mm-hmm. That's an old game. And they're using that for Skyrim, which explains some things. But that does also make it consistent for the modding community and all three of those games. So you can find a thriving modding community who do all sorts of weird stuff.
It's wild.
So I am curious. Anybody in the audience who would like to share, what do you think? If you were to one thing that a company can do to foster a good relationship with their company, with their community. Sorry, what do you think that would be in your mind? What do you really want as part of a community when it comes to the gaming community?
I'm with Rodesius there. If the companies just gave us free money, I'd be like, hey, you got my support, fam.
That was way too fast, Brodasius. Way too fast.
He's been thinking about this for a while.
For me, I think it's simply something that I think always leads to a strong community is giving the community tools to create their own content for the game, whether it's like mod support or their own thing in game that allows you to create adventures or whatever. Anytime I see a game implement stuff like that, people go nuts with it.
Yeah. I think our money also hit on a good point. Listen to our requests, and if you can't fulfill, explain why, so that we aren't left thinking that they just can't do it. And Berdicius echoed that. Yeah, I mean, yeah, it's true. I mean, show that you're listening to your community, because at the end of the day, as a creator of an IP, so I've been on both sides of kind of that line. I mean, we the three of us here, we're straddling both sides of that line. And on the one hand, as a creator, and you're trying to push something out there, create your vision. Create the vision that you want to see, because if you don't, then what are you doing there? But also, whatever you're trying to create, whether it's a product, service, but in this game, um, you do have to listen to the players, because they're the ones who are going to play your game. They're the ones who are going to inhabit the universe that you create, and they, whether you want to accept it or not, whether you want to believe it or not, they have a say in it, or rather, they should have a say, because they're the ones who are going to inhabit that game. They're the ones who are going to create stories that are they're going to tell their friends, or they're going to make friends, or they're going to make relationships playing your game, whether it's tabletop, whether it's a video game. Stories, personal stories, are going to spring up out of the world that you built. So you owe it to your players to listen to them, and do your best to kind of meet them halfway in that regard.
Yeah,
Out
like
of water. And yeah, it's and I would say most. Okay, maybe I'm being a little generous. I would say a number of studios do listen to varying degrees to their communities. It just surprises me that at the amount of studios that don't, but also the amount of studios that kind of pull a Watsy at some point. They completely, just, yeah, whatever. And we've seen it happen with many studios over the
oh yeah,
years.
uh,
It's
it was
I don't know.
Bethesda.
It's always really surprising when that happens,
Yeah,
because it's like, did you not learn from that guy over there?
yeah, like when Bethesda tried to do the paid mod stuff, or they
Yeah.
tried to sell their own versions of popular mods, pretty much reskinning stuff that actually
Mhm.
looked worse. Like there quite a lot of stuff in their paid mod stuff that you could actually point to an actual free mod. It's like, oh yeah, they just took this and changed the coat of paint on like the armor or whatever thing, and it just kind of looks worse, and now you're paying for it.
There's got to be a point in there. Here's the saddest part about this: it is hard to build a community around a product or a service or even an idea. Any type of community. It's hard. It takes a lot of work, a lot of dedication, and you've got to be there. So the really, really sad part is that somehow these companies have, and I imagine some of it comes with success and size, but they've forgotten how much had to go into building that community for anybody to take steps that would, potentially seriously damage the community itself.
Mhm.
When you get to that point, personally, I would think that you would be even more protective of your community. But it seems to be exactly the opposite in a lot of these cases, where they, too big to fail kind of thing. The community's so large that they're like, whatever, we're just going to lose one or two. Don't care. And where, the little guy looks at that and says, well, send them here, I don't think I'm ever going to understand that thinking of, it's now there's definitely reasons when it comes to that community piece where certain elements you may not be desirable at points at times. But to just completely turn your back on your community and say, we're you're here to serve us. We're just going to take advantage of you now. That to me is absolutely ridiculous. And even when you look at, like, video games have a all games really have a life cycle, but I mean, video games in particular have a life cycle, a structured life cycle, the scientific formula to it. And once you get to the point where the idea is once you get to the point where you peak, until you get to that peak point, you're going to continually offer more value to build to that peak. And once you get to that peak, that's considered your midlife. At that point's when you start to commercialize the game, really commercialize the game, because at that point you want to pull everything you can out of it. Now, the myth is that you lose money all the way up to this point. That's propaganda bullshit. Now, early on, you're going to take a loss because you've got to build that game. You got to get it out there. You've got to get people to engage with it. You've got to build that community. But then this idea that on the downward slide, suddenly it becomes okay to take advantage of everybody. And you essentially, it's like a self-fulfilling prophecy. It's like you killed your own game. You decided that this game wasn't worth supporting anymore, wasn't worth developing anymore. So now you're just going to suck everything you can out of it on its way to the bottom. And to me, that's just wrong thinking. I just don't. I mean, yes, there's going to come a point, probably for most games, there are the occasional exception. You know,
that game's like a cockroach.
but there's well, and we talked about one earlier, Skyrim, same thing. I mean,
yeah, you're wrong.
The potential is there for that community to just perpetually build forward. And ideally, you continue to introduce new things. You continue to add value for those folks. But for whatever reason, the practice has become exactly the opposite. The practice has become build the community and then take advantage of them. I think in a lot, most cases.
Yeah, I mean that's the way some of them do think. But I mean, like as I said before, like Nintendo, they like the Smash Bros. Melee there's still a very strong community behind that game. And that's like a GameCube era game. It's old. And there are several sequels to Smash Bros. Melee that have come out. But that game has still maintained a very strong community. And people want to play it. There are people who play that competitively. They're extremely skilled people who play that game. And unlike many other companies that create competitive-based games, Nintendo doesn't support the competitive scene whatsoever. In fact, they try to shut it down. And it's like...
Yeah, PS2 era was peak.
Yeah. Sorry about that. And, like, it's kind of sad to see sometimes, because... And, like, I get that, like, Nintendo, they've come out and said, like, publicly that they don't really want a competitive scene for their games. They want them to stay, like, casual party games. So that's kind of why they have that lack of support for the Melee competitive scene. But, like, I feel like there should be a point where they should just roll with it, because it's... People want to do that, and frankly, there's money to be made if they support it. Like, competitions would take off. People who play the game competitively could actually make money doing that if the company supported it.
Games Workshop, man. They built their business off of competitive play. Warhammer 40K. I mean, they created. Well, they created a game system so that they could sell their product. I'll say that again. They created a game system so that they could sell their product. Because Games Workshop didn't start out making games. They started out making minis. That's where their money was at.
Smart.
So they created a game so they could sell their product. And now they make a frickin' mint selling their product because of the games that have jumped up around it.
Mm-hmm. I mean, we can do a whole episode on Games Workshop. I love them. I love the Warhammer 40k. I mean, I love the Warhammer IP in general, both fantasy and 40k. I've been a fan for years. Never got into the plastic crack, just because shit is expensive and very, very time consuming. So, but I mean, yeah, it's kind of, I guess, round it all out. For anybody who's listening or anybody who cares, whatever you try to do, if you're trying to create something, whatever it is, listen to your community. They're literally the driving force behind what you do, or one of the driving forces. The first being you yourself and those you work with, but they're the ones that you're out there trying to fill whatever need it is for. Just listen to them, have that conversation, and honestly, you'll find most communities receptive to a discussion, even if things don't go their way. Like, I believe Aramania said it a bit ago. She's like, even if you can't do the thing, just let us know, have that conversation, because it could be where you can't do the thing now, but maybe down the road when software gets better, or XYZ thing gets better that allows you to do that, you can revisit that thing. It seems, I don't know, that's just my 2 cents. Maybe it's an idealistic approach, but it seems like the easiest way to really avoid a lot of the issues that we've seen these kind of companies have is just talk. Like, have an honest conversation and admit when you fuck up. And I think, honestly, I'm kind of circling back to CD Projekt Red here. I think that was part of their saving grace, is they admitted that, yeah, we fucked up. And then they took steps to kind of make that better as they could. But that's my 2 cents on that, and we are coming up on time, or actually, I think we're past time. Not that I really check the clock; I really don't care, as long as the conversation's good and everybody's having a good time. But yeah, so
yeah, I gotta add a little bit to that, Rob, because that was fantastic. Especially for new groups. People who are, young studios such as our own, definitely listen to your community. It's okay to have that creative bias. I mean, you've got your product and you want to create your product. You want to tell your story. But if you really engage your community, you're going to know what story to tell. That's really what it comes down to. Because you're going to know what the people want. And if you want to be successful with it, then that's what you need to know. That's the key is really simple. You find out where the need is at, and then you fill the hole. Simple as that. We sometimes get too caught up on, I want to do what I want to do. I want to create my thing. And then, kind of we make it, you buy it kind of deal. And it doesn't work. Now, in that same note about listening to your community for small guys, I think it's even more important for the big guys. Now, doesn't mean that you should do everything that it doesn't mean that you should do everything that the community tells you. But it does mean that you should listen and at least acknowledge what they're telling you. And if you don't use something, then explain why. Talk to them about it. Tell them, this is why we want to do this. And at least give them a chance to respond. And I think what gets missed by a lot of the large companies anymore is, rather than go through the, quote unquote hassle of engaging their community in that fashion, they just decide and make changes. I could be completely off base there, but I know from a small studio's standpoint, absolutely, I definitely think that is the absolute way to go, is to make sure you're engaging your community, make sure that you have good ties to them, and that you're actively listening to what they have to say about your product, about your presentation, whatever it happens to be, so that you can continually make adjustments to improve. We can't do this by ourselves. That's just, there's nobody ever who just decided, okay, I'm going to create this thing and I'm just going to go out and sell it to everybody. There's always other people involved. So, make sure that you're good with that and that you're engaging those other people so that you can learn and grow together. And that's my 2 cents.
Streamlabs lied to you, Brodicious? What do you mean?
You tried to do the slots thing.
Oh, okay.
You gotta
talk to Greg about that.
You gotta put a bet in there, buddy. So you gotta do like that.
Okay. But kind of to scroll back through the chat a little bit here. British has also brought up a good example, actually, of Linus from Linus Tech Tips. You guys who don't know, go out and check his YouTube channel. I mean, he's been around for over a decade now. I remember him back when I was in college. Fantastic guy. I mean, he's 100% transparent about obviously the things that he can be, with his community. I mean, he even stepped down as CEO because he was honest. He I don't like doing this. He put out a video about it and everything. He's still part of the community. I'm pretty sure he still owns the community. He's just not. He owns the business. He's just not running. He's not the CEO. Just because that's not his area of expertise, and he fully admitted it. I have a lot of respect for Linus. I think he's probably one of the best technical content creators out there, without a shadow of a doubt. And Armani has said, yeah, it boils down to communication. Yeah, it really does. Just talk with your people, man. Talk with the community, the guys that he some of his videos can be a little much, yeah. They can be a little outlandish sometimes, but I find them for the most part funny. And I believe it's probably want to spend more time with the family, which is understandable. But before we get too off topic, Matt, sorry, I didn't mean to kind of cut in there. Do you have anything to add before we wrap up?
I don't know. I feel like we've said it all. Like, a strong community only leads to good things and can exponentially expand the life of a game well beyond what it normally would otherwise be. So let it flourish. Simple as that.
Yeah.
All right.
Agreed. And yes, thank you, Brodicious. You guys are awesome. You guys are the reason why we're here. That's we do this for you guys, and hopefully you guys learn a couple things and enjoy yourselves. That's the goal. But with that said, that is the end of episode 10. Thank you guys for joining us tonight. Joining us again this Friday for the BOR, which is the other stream that we do here on the Rasmus Has channel, hosted by Greg as our GM. Myself, Matt, and a couple of other folks play basically a ragtag group of individuals just trying to survive in the mean streets of Cyberpunk in Night City. That is, I believe, at 2000 EST, 8 o'clock for those who don't know how to tell time. And join us again here next Wednesday for episode 11 of the update log. Again, thank you guys for having for joining us. Have a good night, and see you guys on Friday.
Awesome. And if you have not already, please don't forget to hit the follow button before we take off. We're going to raid into Lord Gasumba tonight. So please do show him some love. And looking forward to seeing you guys Friday night or next Wednesday. Or both. Be great. And I gotta get the raid ready here. I should have done this already. And here we go.